Hi, I'm Avery. 2 years ago, I fled a controlling marriage, pregnant with twins, driving through a sandstorm with nothing but the clothes on my back to start over. I thought I had lost everything. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost it all. I was preparing to find myself again. Before I share this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you've ever overcome something you thought was impossible. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happened next. The microphone felt heavy in my hand that night, heavier than it should have. 7 years of marriage, and here I was, standing before 300 donors at the Tucson Arts Collective Gala, about to toast to love and partnership while my world was crumbling behind the curtain. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. The spotlight was warm on my face, familiar. I'd done this hundreds of times before, back when I was Avery Quinn, documentary filmmaker, back when my name meant something more than Mrs. Ethan Cross. I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Through the gap in the stage curtains, I saw them. My husband's hand on Rachel's lower back, his new 25-year-old assistant, the way she looked up at him, the way he leaned down to whisper in her ear. The intimacy of it knocked the breath from my lungs. Art, I continued, somehow finding words while my marriage dissolved in real time, has the power to transform communities, to give voice to the voiceless. The irony wasn't lost on me. When had I become voiceless? When had I traded my camera for charity galas, my stories for his success? The rest of my speech blurred together. Autopilot took over. Smile, gesture, pause for applause. Inside, I was screaming. The desert heat pressed against the windows, and I felt like I was suffocating in my own skin. After the gala, in our Tesla heading home through the dark desert roads, I finally spoke. I saw you with Rachel. Ethan's hands didn't even tighten on the steering wheel. Saw what exactly? Don't, my voice cracked. Just don't. You're being paranoid, Avery. This is exactly why I've been distant. You're always imagining things, creating drama where there isn't any. The gaslight was so smooth, so practiced. When had he gotten so good at this? I gave up everything for you, I whispered. My career, my friends in New York, No one asked you to do that. His voice was cold as the air conditioning blasting between us. You made that choice. Don't blame me for your regrets. We drove the rest of the way in silence, the desert stretching endlessly on either side. I pressed my forehead against the cool window and watched the saguaro cacti pass like dark sentinels. 7 years. 7 years of slowly disappearing, of becoming smaller and smaller until I barely recognized myself in the mirror. That night, I couldn't sleep. Our bedroom felt like a mausoleum, all marble and glass and sharp edges. Ethan snored beside me, unbothered. How could he sleep? How could he lie there as if he hadn't just shattered everything? I slipped out of bed and padded to my old office, now a storage room for his golf clubs and real estate awards. In the back of a drawer, I found it, a magazine article I'd torn out months ago. Starting over, women who rebuilt their lives after loss. I'd hidden it like contraband, like evidence of a crime I was planning to commit. Next to it was an unopened pregnancy test. A joke, really. After 3 years of trying, countless fertility treatments, the diagnosis of PCOS, and inhospitable conditions. Ethan's words, not the doctor's. We'd stopped trying 2 years ago. He'd stopped touching me not long after. I held both items in my hands, weighing them like possible futures. Outside, a monsoon was building. I could feel it in the air pressure, the way the wind picked up and scattered palm fronds across our manicured lawn. I left at 3 a.m. while the storm was still gathering strength. Just grabbed my keys, that article, the pregnancy test, and drove north toward Flagstaff. No plan, no destination, just away. The wind howled around my old Honda Civic, the one car I'd insisted on keeping despite Ethan's embarrassment. It doesn't fit our image, he'd said, but it was mine, purchased with money I'd earned, and tonight it was my escape pod. 40 miles out of Tucson, the sandstorm hit full force. The world disappeared into a wall of brown, my headlights useless against the swirling dust. I pulled over, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A flickering neon sign, Maria's Desert Rest. I barely made it to the parking lot before the visibility dropped to zero. The wind rocked my car like a cradle or a threat. I ran for the office, sand stinging my face and arms. Dios mío! Come in! Come in! The woman behind the desk was already holding the door open, fighting against the wind. This storm, it came from nowhere. Her name was Maria, 52 years old with silver streaking through her long black hair. She made me tea while the storm raged outside, and something about her presence, solid, warm, unquestioning, made me start crying. First time running? She asked gently, sitting across from me in the small lobby. I laughed through my tears. Is it that obvious? Mija, I've run this place for 15 years. I know the look. She leaned back, studying me. Let me guess. He told you that you were crazy, that it was all in your head. I stared at her, stunned. How did you... Because they all say the same things. Every woman who's walked through that door in the middle of the night running from something, they all have the same story, just different details. She told me her own story then, while the storm battered the windows. An abusive marriage, 3 children, a midnight escape to her sisters in Phoenix. Years of rebuilding, of learning to trust her own voice again. The hardest part, she said, refilling my tea, wasn't leaving. It was believing I deserved to leave. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind. Finally, she stood. Room 7 is clean. Stay as long as you need. Sometimes getting lost is the only way to find yourself again. The room was simple. Clean sheets, a painting of the desert at sunset, a window facing east. I sat on the bed and pulled out the pregnancy test, turning it over in my hands. What was I even thinking? But something made me take it anyway. Maybe it was the storm. The surreal quality of the night, the feeling that anything could happen in this in-between place. I waited the 3 minutes in the tiny bathroom, listening to sand pelt the window. When I looked, I had to sit down on the closed toilet seat. 2 lines, clear as day. I must have made a sound because Maria knocked on my door. You okay in there, mija? I opened the door, holding the test like evidence of a miracle or a catastrophe. I wasn't sure which. Maria's eyes widened, then softened. Well, she said quietly, the universe has a sense of timing, doesn't it? I can't. We tried it for years. The doctor said... I couldn't finish. Doctors don't know everything. Sometimes the body waits until we're ready, even if we don't feel ready. She guided me back to sit on the bed. What does your heart tell you? That I'm terrified, I admitted. That I'm alone. That I have nothing, no job, no home of my own, no... Stop! Maria's voice was firm but kind. You're not alone. And having nothing, sometimes that's the best place to start building everything. The next morning, I drove back to Tucson with the sunrise painting the mountains pink. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. Everything looked different in the morning light. Clearer, somehow. Ethan found me packing. Where the hell were you? I had to make excuses at the Campbell brunch. I'm leaving. The words came out calmer than I expected. He laughed, actually laughed. And go where? You have nothing without me, Avery. No career, no connections here. You threw all that away, remember? I remember. I zipped up my suitcase. I remember everything. That's when he saw the pregnancy test on the dresser. His face went through several expressions. Shock, calculation, strategy. Is it? He couldn't even finish. Mine, I said firmly. Just mine. He tried everything then. Promises to change, threats about custody, reminders of our life together. But I'd heard Maria's voice in the storm. The hardest part is believing you deserve to leave. I deserve to leave. I found a studio apartment in Barrio Viejo, Tucson's old neighborhood. Adobe walls, tile floors, a tiny courtyard with a struggling lemon tree. The rent was cheap, the neighbors mostly artists and retired teachers. It was a far cry from our glass mansion in the foothills, and it felt more like home than that place ever had. The morning sickness hit hard and fast. Not morning sickness. All day, all night sickness. I spent hours on the bathroom floor, the cool tile against my cheek, wondering what I'd done. My savings were dwindling. My phone rang with calls from Ethan, from his lawyer, from mutual friends wanting to know what really happened. I turned off my phone and started writing. The blog began as survival. Dust and dawn. A place to put all the words that were choking me. I wrote about the pregnancy, about starting over. about the peculiar grief of mourning someone who was still alive. Today, I threw up in a grocery store parking lot, I wrote. A kind woman gave me water and didn't ask questions. These small mercies feel like miracles. One evening, struggling to carry groceries up my stairs, I felt a flutter in my belly. Then another. I froze on the landing, grocery bags forgotten. Hello, I whispered to my stomach. Are you really in there? The flutter came again, like an answer. That night, I picked up my old camera for the first time in years. I started with self-portraits, my growing belly, my hands cradling this impossible life. Then I ventured out, documenting the neighborhood, the murals, the old-timers sitting on porches, the way the light hit the adobe at sunset. A woman at the laundromat noticed my camera. You a photographer? I used to be, I said. What's the difference between used to be and am? She shifted her baby on her hip. Seems like you're holding a camera and taking pictures. That makes you a photographer. Her name was Carmen. Single mom, 3 kids, working 2 jobs. She became my first portrait subject outside of myself, and then she introduced me to others. Rosa, who'd left her husband with nothing but her children and determination. Linda, whose partner had vanished when she got pregnant. A community of women rebuilding their lives from scratch. The first comment on my blog came 3 weeks after I started. Thank you for writing this. I'm sitting in my car outside my house, afraid to go in, and your words make me feel less alone. Then another. I left last month. Reading this gives me hope. And another. Please keep writing. We need these stories. I wrote about the ultrasound where I discovered it was twins. The technician's eyes had widened. 2 heartbeats, she'd said, and I'd burst into tears. Terror, overwhelming awe at my body's secret rebellion. Twins. After years of being told I was inhospitable, I was growing 2 lives. I wrote about the fear that came at 3 a.m., the voice that sounded like Ethan's. You'll never be a good mother. You can't even take care of yourself. I wrote about fighting back against that voice, about the strength found in oatmeal for dinner and thrift store maternity clothes and neighbors who left casseroles at my door without asking questions. Maria called one evening. I've been reading your blog, she said without preamble. That woman in Phoenix who needed a place to stay, I sent her to you. How did you even find it? Mija, you think you're the only one Googling starting over after leaving husband Tucson? Your blog is the first thing that comes up. She was right. Women started reaching out, some local, some from across the country. They shared their stories, their fears, their small victories. My tiny studio became a gathering place on Sunday afternoons. We'd sit in the courtyard under the lemon tree, drinking tea and talking about everything. Custody battles, job hunting while pregnant, the way trauma lived in our bodies and how to coax it out. We should have a name, suggested Carmen one afternoon. Make it official. The Dawn Collective, I said without thinking, because we're all waiting for the sun to rise. 6 months pregnant with twins, I could barely see my feet. The Arizona summer was brutal, but the women kept coming. We'd outgrown my courtyard. Carmen found a community center that would let us use their space for free on Sundays. Our first official meeting had 12 women. I waddled to the front, breathless from the effort, and looked at their faces. Tired, hopeful, determined faces. I don't have any answers, I began. I'm scared every day. But I know this. We're stronger together than alone. The Dawn Collective isn't about having it all figured out. It's about figuring it out together. We talked for 3 hours. About practical things, resume writing, childcare resources, legal aid, and harder things, learning to trust again, forgiving ourselves for staying as long as we did, believing we deserved happiness. That night, exhausted and exhilarated, I found an email in my blog inbox. I've been following your journey. I'd like to make a donation to the Dawn Collective. Anonymously. Would $150,000 be helpful? The hummingbird. I stared at the screen, sure I was hallucinating. But the follow-up came with wire transfer instructions and a simple note. Some of us who made it through want to light the way for others. The money changed everything. We could rent a real space, a storefront in downtown Tucson with room for childcare, workshops, a computer lab. Maria drove down from her desert outpost to help set up. Look at you, she said, watching me direct volunteers despite my enormous belly. That scared woman in the sandstorm seems like a lifetime ago. She's still in here, I admitted, hand on my stomach. But she's got company now. We painted the walls sunrise colors: pink, orange, gold. Set up donated computers and comfortable chairs. Created a children's corner with books and toys. The women brought their skills. Carmen taught budgeting. Rosa offered legal aid navigation. Linda ran resume workshops. I taught photography and video, helping women document their journeys, tell their stories on their own terms. Behind the camera, they transformed. The lens gave them power, control over their narrative. Nobody ever asked me what I saw before, one woman said, reviewing her photos. They only told me what to look at. The Dawn Collective officially opened on a Thursday evening in August. The monsoons had started early that year, bringing blessed relief from the heat and dramatic skies for our opening celebration. 53 women came. They brought their children, their mothers, their sisters. The space hummed with conversation in English and Spanish, laughter mixing with the sound of kids playing. I stood by the door, greeting each woman, my twins doing acrobatics in my belly. "You did this," Carmen whispered, squeezing my hand. "We did this," I corrected. The local news showed up. A small piece about community resources, but it meant everything to see our faces on screen, to be visible. The reporter, a young woman named Aliyah, pulled me aside after. "My sister needs this place," she said quietly. "Can I give her your number?" "Give her the center's number," I said. "Someone will always answer." But success brought complications. 3 weeks after opening, Ethan appeared at the center. I was leading a workshop on documentary basics when I saw him through the window, getting out of his Porsche in a suit that cost more than our monthly rent. My hands started shaking. Carmen noticed immediately, stepping smoothly to the front. "Avery needs a water break. Let's talk about composition while she's gone." I met him at the door, blocking his entry. "You can't be here. It's a public space," he said, but his eyes were scanning behind me, calculating. "Quite the operation you've got. With whose money? Not yours. Everything you have is mine, Avery. Community property laws." "I have nothing," I cut him off. "Remember? You made sure to remind me of that when I left." His jaw tightened. "You're carrying my children." "I'm carrying my children. We'll see what the courts say about that." He turned to leave, then paused. "Nice blog, by the way. My lawyer's been screenshot-ting everything. Doesn't paint you as the most stable parent, does it? All that talk about mental health struggles, financial instability, and..." After he left, I locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed. All the strength I'd built felt like tissue paper against his words. The other women found me there, formed a protective circle. "He's trying to scare you," Linda said. She'd been through a custody battle. "Document everything, keep writing, but be smart about it." "What if he's right?" I whispered. "What if I'm not stable enough? Son, stop!" Rosa's voice was firm. "You built this place while growing 2 humans. You're the most stable person I know." I hired a lawyer with part of the Hummingbird Fund. Denise was in her 60s, had seen everything, took my case for reduced fees. "Keep doing what you're doing," she advised. "Building community, seeking therapy, maintaining employment, even if self-employed. The blog is actually helpful. It shows your commitment to growth and healing." So I kept writing, more carefully now, but still truthfully. The blog's readership had grown to thousands. Women from across the country shared their stories in the comments, creating a digital version of our Sunday circles. One night, unable to sleep from the twins' gymnastics, I started a live stream. "Can't Sleep Diaries," I called it. Just me, talking to the camera about fear and hope at 3 a.m. "I used to be somebody," I said to the lens. "I had a career, awards, a future mapped out. Now I'm nobody. No husband, no traditional job, no certainty. But maybe being nobody means I can become anybody. Maybe we have to lose ourselves completely to find out who we really are." The chat exploded with hearts and comments. Women from different time zones, all awake with their own fears, creating a constellation of support across the darkness. At 34 weeks, my body started protesting. The doctor put me on modified bed rest. "Twins like to come early," she warned. "Take it easy." But the center needed me. We'd started offering evening classes, coding, English as a second language, small business basics. Local professionals volunteered their time. The childcare room was always full. Women were getting jobs, leaving abusive situations, starting businesses. I compromised by leading workshops from a reclining chair, my swollen feet propped up. We launched Skills for Rebuilding, a 6-week program covering everything from financial literacy to trauma-informed yoga. That's when Jace first volunteered. Maria had met him at a community event and thought his fire safety workshop would be valuable. He was 38, quiet, with kind eyes that carried their own grief. "My wife died 3 years ago," he told me simply when I asked why he wanted to help. "Cancer. This place, it reminds me that rebuilding is possible." He taught the women about fire safety, but also about metaphorical fires, how to escape dangerous situations, how to build emergency plans, how to protect what matters most. The monsoon season intensified. Every afternoon, the sky would darken and unleash torrents of rain. The desert drank it gratefully, and wildflowers began blooming in unexpected places. Like my life, I thought, watching rain streak the center's windows. Unexpected blooms in barren ground. My blog post that week was about finding beauty in difficult seasons. I wrote about the women who'd become family, about my twins who'd grown strong despite everything, about the courage it takes to believe in tomorrow when today is still so hard. "The desert teaches patience," I wrote. "It shows us that what looks dead might just be waiting for the right conditions to bloom. We are all desert flowers, conserving our strength until the rains come." The post went viral. Suddenly, donations poured in from across the country. Media requests filled my inbox. The Dawn Collective was becoming something bigger than I'd imagined, but my body had other plans. It happened during a live stream. 200 women were logged in for Rebuilding After Divorce, a practical guide. I was mid-sentence about health insurance when the first contraction hit. I paused, breathed through it. False labor, I told myself. Still 6 weeks early. As I was saying, Cobra coverage can be expensive, but the second contraction stole my words. This time, I felt a warm gush. Carmen, monitoring the chat, saw my face change. "Technical difficulties, ladies. We'll be right back." "My water broke," I whispered, gripping the desk. Outside, the biggest monsoon of the season was building, the sky green-black with threat. Maria took charge. "Hospital bag?" "In my car." "I'm driving." She turned to Carmen. "Call Dr. Martinez. Tell her we're coming. Jace, can you—" "I'll follow in my truck," he said, already moving. "These storms flood the underpasses. We might need alternate routes." The rain started as we reached the parking lot. Not a gradual build, but an immediate deluge, like the sky had been holding its breath and finally let go. Maria's truck crawled through streets that were rapidly becoming rivers. Tucson's infrastructure couldn't handle this much water this fast. Every dip in the road was a potential trap. "Breathe, mija," Maria coached, one hand on the wheel, one reaching over to squeeze mine during contractions. These babies waited this long, they can wait a little longer. But the contractions were coming faster, stronger. I could feel the pressure building, my body insisting despite my mind's protests. Then we hit the flooded underpass. Water rose around the truck, higher than the wheels. The engine sputtered. "Hold on." Maria tried to reverse, but we were stuck. Cars behind us were already backing up. The water kept rising. That's when Jace's truck appeared in the rearview mirror, lights flashing. He was out and wading through the flood before Maria could protest. "Emergency services are overwhelmed," he shouted over the rain, helping me shift from Maria's truck to his higher one. "I know a back route." I gripped his arm as another contraction hit. "I don't think they're going to wait." "Then we don't wait either." His voice was calm, competent. This was a man who'd run into burning buildings. A flood was just another emergency to navigate. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Jace drove with precision through the chaos, calling out turns to Maria following behind. He'd radioed ahead to his firefighter contacts, ensuring the hospital was ready. "Almost there," he kept saying. "You're doing great, just hold on." But my body had other plans. I could feel the pressure increasing, the urge to push becoming overwhelming. "I can't, they're coming." 2 more minutes. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. 2 more minutes, Avery. You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." We screeched into the emergency bay just as I felt the first twin descending. They whisked me into delivery while Maria filled out paperwork and Jace paced the waiting room. 30 weeks is early but viable, Dr. Martinez said, checking monitors. But these babies are in a hurry, ready to meet your miracles? I wasn't ready. I'd never be ready. But my body didn't care about my fear. Luna came first, screaming despite her tiny size. Then Sol, quieter but breathing. 4 pounds each, fighters from their first breath. They whisked them to NICU before I could hold them. Are they? I couldn't finish the question. They're small but strong, the nurse assured me, like their mama. Maria was there when they wheeled me to recovery, Jace hovering in the doorway. The whole center is praying, Maria said. Carmen's organizing meal trains already. I need to see them. The emptiness in my arms was unbearable. Soon, Dr. Martinez promised. Let's make sure you're stable first. You lost more blood than we'd like. The next hours blurred together. Forms to sign, risks explained, percentages quoted. Somewhere in the haze, I signed papers acknowledging the dangers. For them, for me. Ethan's words echoed, "You'll never be a good mother." But then they wheeled me to NICU, and I saw them. My daughters. Impossibly small. Covered in wires and tubes, but perfect. Perfect. Hello, my loves. I whispered through the incubator. I'm your mom. We're going to figure this out together. The NICU became my world. I pumped milk every 3 hours, held my daughters skin to skin when allowed, sang to them in whispers. The nurses taught me to read their monitors, to change impossibly small diapers, to feed them through tubes until they were strong enough to nurse. I wrote in the quiet hours, posting dispatches from the NICU on the blog. Raw, honest accounts of premature motherhood, of loving someone so fiercely while being terrified of losing them. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in for the twins' medical bills. Women shared their own NICU stories. A community of mothers who'd walked this path lit candles across the country. Jace came every day after his volunteer shifts. He brought real coffee, not the hospital swill, and sat quietly while I pumped or cried or both. Sometimes he took photos for the blog, my hands cradling Luna, Saul's tiny fingers wrapped around mine. Why? I asked him one evening. You barely know me. I know courage when I see it, he said simply. After Melissa died, I thought I'd never see beauty in the world again. But watching you, the center, these babies fighting, it reminds me that life insists on continuing, even after loss. Maria managed the center in my absence, sending daily updates. The women had organized themselves, teaching each other, supporting newcomers. The Dawn Collective was proving it could survive without me at the helm, a strange mix of pride and unnecessary hurt. You built something bigger than yourself, Maria said during a visit. That's the point, isn't it? Creating something that doesn't need you to survive? 3 weeks into our NICU stay, Saul developed an infection. Those were the darkest days, watching her fight for each breath. I lived on the edge of panic, afraid to hope, afraid not to. She's named after the sun, I told her through the incubator. And the sun always rises. You hear me, baby girl? The sun always rises. Luna, as if sensing her sister's struggle, began gaining weight rapidly. The nurses called her the cheerleader, always active, always vocal. She's telling Saul to hurry up, one said. Twins do that, push each other forward. I thought about that often in the deep nights. How we all need someone to push us forward when we can't move ourselves. Saul turned the corner on a Tuesday. Her oxygen levels stabilized, the infection retreated. I sobbed with relief, clutching the incubator. That's when Ethan appeared in the NICU doorway, holding papers. You can't be here, I said, body automatically shielding the incubators. Court order, he said, handing papers to the nurse. Establishing paternity for custody proceedings. The nurse looked uncomfortable but let him approach. He stared at the twins, and I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise? Regret? Then his lawyer mask slipped back on. They're premature because of your recklessness, he said quietly. Living in poverty, working yourself to exhaustion. This is evidence, Avery. Get out! My voice was steady despite my rage. Get out before I call security. He left, but the damage was done. The legal battle I'd dreaded was beginning, and my daughters were still fighting for their lives. I called Denise from the hospital bathroom, hyperventilating. He's going to take them. He has money, connections. Breathe, she commanded. He has to prove you're unfit. Building a successful nonprofit while pregnant is not unfit. Having premature twins is not unfit. Being a single mother is not unfit. Document everything. Keep doing what you're doing. So I did. I live-streamed from the Niku, with permission, showing the daily reality of premature twins. The beautiful and the terrifying. The small victories and setbacks. Thousands of women watched Luna finally nurse successfully, cheered when Soul came off oxygen. This is motherhood, I said to the camera one night. Not the Pinterest version, but the real thing. Messy and frightening and the fiercest love you'll ever know. The blog comments became a lifeline. Women sharing their custody battles, their NICU journeys, their own resurrections from difficult circumstances. We were a tribe of survivors, scattered but connected. Jace started bringing his guitar to the NICU. He'd play quietly in the family lounge while I pumped folk songs and lullabies. Other NICU parents would drift in, drawn by the music. Soon we had an informal support group, sharing coffee and fear and hope. You create community wherever you go, he told me one evening. It's a gift. It's survival, I corrected. None of us can do this alone. 6 weeks after their dramatic arrival, Luna was ready for discharge. Soul needed another week. The nurse taught me to manage their medications, their feeding schedules, the monitors they'd go home with. You're ready, she assured me, seeing my panic. You've been ready since day one. But leaving Saul behind while taking Luna home was agony. I understood then what they meant about your heart living outside your body. Mine was split between my apartment and the hospital, beating in 2 tiny chests. The night before Saul's discharge, I sat in my quiet apartment with Luna sleeping on my chest and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at me, waiting. I knew what I had to do. The video took 3 hours to record, editing through tears and exhaustion. The truth about wounds and healing. 43 minutes of raw honesty. The marriage, the gaslighting, the escape. The pregnancy, the center, the NICU. Ethan's threats, my fears, the community that caught me when I fell. I'm sharing this because silence is what lets shame grow, I said to the camera. Because somewhere, a woman is sitting in her car, afraid to leave. Because my daughters deserve to grow up knowing their mother chose courage over comfort. I uploaded it at 3 a.m., then closed the laptop and held Luna until sunrise. By morning, the video had 10,000 views. By noon, 50,000. The comments were a flood of recognition, support, shared stories. Media outlets started calling. The Dawn Collective's donation page crashed from traffic. Ethan's response came through his lawyer. A cease and desist. Threats of defamation suits. Denise laughed when she read it. Truth is an absolute defense, she said. He can threaten all he wants. You didn't name him or his company. You told your story. That's your right. But the real response came from the community. Local news picked up the story. National outlets followed. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the Dawn Collective, about the women rebuilding their lives in the desert. More importantly, women started coming forward, not just to the center, but publicly. Dust and Dawn became a hashtag, a movement. Corporate sponsors reached out. A publisher wanted to discuss a book deal. You changed the conversation, Aaliyah, the reporter, told me during a follow-up interview. From shame to strength, that's powerful. Saul came home on a Thursday. Both my girls, finally under one roof. The apartment felt complete and impossibly full. 2 babies, endless equipment, no sleep, and joy so profound it made my chest ache. The women from the center created a rotation, bringing meals, holding babies while I showered, simply sitting with me during the 3 a.m. feeds. Community in action, the village we'd built for ourselves. Jace assembled cribs, installed baby gates, baby-proofed with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many preventable accidents. He never overstepped, never assumed, just showed up and helped. One evening, both girls finally sleeping, he asked, "What's next for the center?" I'd been thinking about that. The donations had grown our bank account significantly. We could expand, hire staff, create more programs. Phoenix wants us to open a branch, I said. So do Albuquerque and El Paso. But I don't want to lose what makes us special. The intimacy, the peer support, the grassroots feeling. So don't, he said simply. Grow but stay rooted, like those desert plants you write about. The custody mediation was scheduled for December. Ethan, perhaps feeling the public pressure, had agreed to mediation instead of court. His reputation, his business, couldn't withstand the scrutiny my video had brought. I prepared meticulously. Financial records showing stability, letters from doctors about the twins' progress, testimonials from women whose lives had changed through the center, evidence of community, support, love. The morning of mediation, I dressed carefully. Professional, but authentic. Luna and Sol were with Maria, safe and loved. Jace drove me to the courthouse, steady presence without words. In the mediation room, Ethan looked smaller than I remembered. His lawyer did most of the talking, requests for regular visitation, shared custody eventually, removal of the blog posts about him. My client has built a successful life, Denise countered. She's financially stable, emotionally supported, and providing excellent care for the children. Mr. Cross is welcome to regular, supervised visitation building to unsupervised as relationships develop. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of negotiation, of standing firm on what mattered while bending on what didn't. In the end, we had an agreement. Supervised visitation building to unsupervised. Child support. No restrictions on my writing as long as I didn't use his name or identify his business. Freedom, legally documented. Outside the courthouse, December sun warming my face, I called Maria. It's done, he agreed. I could hear her crying, then cheering, then passing the phone around the center. A chorus of celebration. My chosen family rejoicing in this victory. Come home, Maria said finally. Your girls are waiting. Home. A word that meant something different now. Not a place, but a feeling, a community, a future being built one day at a time. Jace drove in comfortable silence, but at a red light he reached over and squeezed my hand. You did it. We did it, I corrected, all of us. As we pulled up to the center, I saw the banner. Welcome home, Avery, Luna, and Sol. Women and children spilled out the doors, creating a tunnel of joy for us to walk through. This was what rising looked like. Not a single heroic moment, but 1,000 small acts of courage. A community lifting each other, beauty growing in the desert despite all odds. 2 years later, I stood on the TED Women's stage looking out at an audience of thousands. The lights were bright, but I'd learned to be comfortable in spotlights again. The desert teaches us about resilience, I began. In the Sonoran, we have plants that wait decades for the right conditions to bloom. They look dead, dried out, finished. But they're not dead. They're waiting, conserving, preparing. I talked about the Dawn Collective, now 5 locations across the Southwest. About the 3,000 women we'd served, the dozens of businesses started, the cycles of violence broken, the infrastructure of support we'd built from nothing but determination and community. But mostly, I talked about rebirth. How sometimes we have to burn down everything we thought we were to discover who we're meant to be. I used to think starting over meant failure, I said. Now I know it means courage. The courage to say, this isn't working. The courage to believe we deserve better. The courage to rebuild from ashes. Backstage after the talk, my phone buzzed with messages. Maria sent a photo from the Phoenix Center's watch party. Carmen had started her own financial literacy nonprofit. Rosa was in law school. The ripples of our collective rising spreading wider and wider. Luna and Sol, now 2 and thriving, were with Jace at the hotel. He'd become, what? Not quite a father to them, but something precious. A steady presence, a gentle strength. We'd taken our time, both too scarred by loss to rush. But love had grown anyway, patient as a cactus flower. Mama! They shrieked when I returned, running on sturdy legs that had once been too fragile to imagine. I scooped them up, breathing in their little girl scent of crayons and sunshine. How was it? Jace asked, smiling at our tangle of limbs. Terrifying, I admitted. But good terrifying, like jumping off a cliff and finding out you can fly. That evening, we walked the beach. The girls collected shells while Jace and I watched the sunset paint the sky in desert colors, even here by the ocean. The publisher wants a memoir, I told him. The full story, from the beginning. Will you do it? I thought about all the women still sitting in their cars, afraid to leave, still believing the voices that said they were nothing without him, still waiting for permission to save themselves. Yeah, I decided. I'll do it. Saul ran up with a perfect sand dollar, presenting it like treasure. For you, Mama. It's beautiful, baby. Should we send it to Tia Maria? Yes, and Carmen, and Rosa, and... She listed every woman from the center she could remember. Our extended family of survivors and thrivers. That night, I sat on the hotel balcony with my laptop, the girls asleep inside. The cursor blinked, waiting for the first words of a longer story. I thought about where to begin, with the glittering charity gala, the escape into the sandstorm, or further back with a young filmmaker who thought she knew what her life would look like. In the end, I began with the desert. The Sonoran teaches patience, I typed. It shows us that what looks like death might just be a different kind of life, waiting for rain. We are all desert creatures adapted for survival, blooming when the conditions are right. This is the story of my bloom. A text from Maria interrupted. Mija, Channel 12 wants to do a documentary about the collective. You interested in being behind the camera again? I smiled, feeling something shift and settle inside me. Full circle, but different. Not the woman I'd been, but the woman I'd become. Yes, I texted back. Let's tell our story. Jace appeared on the balcony with tea, reading my screen over my shoulder. That publisher doesn't know what they're in for, he said, kissing the top of my head. Neither did I admitted. But that's the beauty of starting over. You get to surprise yourself. The moon rose over the ocean, but I was thinking about the desert, about Maria in that sandstorm, offering shelter to a stranger, about the pregnancy test in a roadside motel bathroom, about Niku nights and community courage and the way women save each other when the world won't, about Ethan, who'd texted that afternoon. Saw your TED Talk. The girls look happy. I'm sorry. 3 words. Years too late. But forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. To set down the weight and keep walking forward. This isn't the life I dreamed of, I said to Jace, unconsciously echoing words from long ago. No, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. No, I confirmed. It's the life I chose to build, and that makes all the difference. Inside, one of the girls stirred, calling out in sleep. I went to them, always and forever, a mother first. But I was also a survivor, a builder, a voice for the voiceless. A woman who'd learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out you had the strength to create anything. The wind rose off the ocean, but I thought of desert wind, of dust and dawn, of women rising despite the odds because of each other, for their children and themselves. We rise, we always rise.